At the end of last spring, I was one of the first people to get my hands on a Ford F150 Lightning Lariat. My partner and I put in a deposit to buy one shortly after it was announced because we live out here in the foothills of the Coast Range. My wife does woodworking as a hobby. We have animals, so we regularly need to carry feed and straw and other things. And of course, I run Transport Evolved, which means we have a large amount of camera equipment and people that we need to get from one place to another. And in the past, while we have used trailers, when we travel to California, there are some pretty strict speed limits for trailers, which makes our journeys a lot longer. So it made sense for us to buy this truck and use it as a crew hauler, a transportation device for all of our gear, also using it to help us with our hobbies at home, help care for the animals, and also run the truck as a backup power supply for our house. So today, I'm here to give you a 21,000 mile update. I had planned to give you a 20,000 mile update, but we were actually driving on a road trip at the time. And so we've just had the truck serviced. So I'm going to tell you about some of those issues, detail some of the issues we've had with software updates, and just give you a general overview about how well the truck is doing. First off, I really like this truck. While we do take our Chevrolet Bolt EV whenever we don't need to carry large amounts of things, i.e. most of the trips to our local town, shopping trips, things like that, general errands at the weekend, we use this primarily for longer distance trips or when we need to haul. We've actually helped 3 or 4 different people move house with us. We've carried numerous amounts of wood and camera gear for various reasons. I've even towed my niece's tiny home, not on the road, off-road, when she needed to move it on the farm she was living on. We've also used this to tow 3 or 4 different cars, 2 of them cross-country, and the truck has taken everything in its stride. It hasn't had any issues with low batteries, as some YouTubers have pointed out. Even when it's towing a full-size car, we were still able to get 100 to 150 miles easily, sometimes even 180 miles in the middle of summer. And in the winter, our range didn't drop like a stone. Yes, there was a noticeable drop in range, as you find with any EV, but we've never been left stranded by the truck. It's never let us down, and it's been super reliable. The home integration system, I'll come to that later in the video and show you some of the issues, is the most unreliable thing, but that's not actually designed by Ford. It's designed by someone else and sold and installed by Sunrun, and we might be about to get them to remove it because frankly we've had enough. The truck though, it's super awesome. At the last service, which cost about $65 US, they did a full inspection of the truck, made sure everything was operating as it should, and they also replaced a 12-volt starter battery under warranty. The reason for that is that the truck stopped doing over-the-air updates in late October, and one of the reasons it stopped doing the over-the-air updates was that it said the 12-volt battery inside the truck was not holding a charge properly. And of course, in order to do an over-the-air update, the 12-volt battery has to be healthy, because the last thing you want is to start to do an over-the-air update and then have it fail midway because the battery died. So when I took the truck in for a service, I was like, hey, Ford's told me that you might need to check and see if the 12-volt battery is okay. It wasn't. They replaced it under warranty, and what do you know? All of my over-the-air updates have started to come through. The over-the-air update that comes through for the Ford F-150 Lightning that allows you to have YouTube and other things play when you're parked up and connected to Wi-Fi hasn't pushed yet. But I have had the range update one that gives my truck more range, except it's not. It's just the gasometer is more optimistic about how far the truck can travel. I'm sitting here at home right now, 95% state of charge, and it says I can do 299 miles. I think realistically in this weather, it's cold, it's wet, it's raining, I'd be closer to about maybe 240, 250 miles, which frankly, I'm more than happy with. And that 240, 250 miles includes me having like 30 or 40 miles of buffer when I get to my destination. So when I say 240, 230 miles, sorry, 240, 250 miles, what I mean is I can drive 250 miles, then stop and charge, and still have range in the battery in the event of an emergency. Seats are super comfortable. I've had no issues with those. We did have some warranty work done on the driver's seat because there was a stain on the seat new from the factory. The local Ford garage actually replaced the wrong part, so we're still waiting for that to be done. Everything else though is hard wearing and is holding up. I really love this. This has become my little cabin, and I store everything in there, from wet wipes, makeup removers, spare masks if we're going somewhere that we need to put a mask on. I also have charging cables, so when the crew is on the road, you can see two of them here, a USB-C and a Thunderbolt cable. And that is really nice to be able to just say to people, hey, just plug in, charge up, whatever. The glove boxes are still great. They're working as they should. The bottom one, unfortunately, is not as hard wearing as I would like. It's got some scratches on it from road trips where people have just, brushed up their feet against it when crossing their legs on the road. But other than that, everything's really cool. No issues with wind or rain ingress into the cabin, and everything works as it should. I've also got a Dashcam installed. You can buy one on Amazon that's actually designed to work with the F150 Lightning, and it plugs into the power source from the mirror, and it looks stock. It's not stock, but it looks stock. And if you've seen any of our videos recently on the channel, you will have seen some of the footage from that camera. I'll have to put a link in the description. This is not sponsored or endorsed. It's just the Dashcam that we ended up buying. And because this is a work truck and because we do a lot of driving in it, I just wanted to have a Dashcam active to, make sure that in the event that something bad happened, it would be caught on camera. This system, the infotainment system, has been really reliable. It hasn't had any issues. Occasionally it needs to be rebooted, and you can do that by holding down the volume down and the back track or forward track. I can't remember which one it is. One of them causes the car or the truck to reboot the system. The other one causes it to go into a secret menu where you can see some of the diagnostic stuff, but shh, don't tell Ford. The other thing I do have want to mention is the inductive wireless charging pad here. It's a Qi wireless charging pad which works with my iPhone. It can be a little bit temperamental, and sometimes when I'm driving, the phone will stop charging. I just have to move it and then recenter the phone, and it will start driving again. The Ford BlueCruise hands-off system has been fantastic. We've had no problems with it. It's been super reliable. It's always done what we've wanted it to. And those who say, yeah, but you have to put your hands on the steering wheel when you go around a corner, that's just the same as Tesla Autopilot. It's a level 2 system. It does take away a lot of driver fatigue and add some additional safety on the road, just like Tesla's Autopilot does. But it's not fully self-driving in the same way that Tesla's system is not full self-driving. You do have to supervise it, and Ford is very gentle about making sure that you are paying attention to the road ahead. But it's really a stress reliever on long distance trips because you're not holding the steering wheel for long periods of time. And I'm finding that I'm able to drive further and arrive less tired at the end of every trip. The only other modification I want to talk to you about here, I'll tell you about some out back in a second, is that we replaced the stupidly long whip antenna that came with the truck with a little stubby one. And that's fine for FM radio. However, medium wave radio reception has suffered, as you might expect, because the antenna is shorter, and it's really medium wave that needs that long antenna. However, I keep the medium wave antenna in the back in the cabinet underneath the rear seats. So if I'm in bad weather or I desperately need to put that long antenna on, I can. To be honest though, I've not had to do that yet. Let's look outside. I know it's raining, but I want to show you some of the other things worthy of note from the truck. At the back of the truck, there's not a lot really to report, but I do want to give you an update on the two optional extras that we installed back here. There's the Retrax Pro retractable hard tonneau cover that's fully powered, and also this is the bed rug, and we got the bedrug that has the kind of the hard material on the bottom and then kind of the soft carpety material on the sides. Both are holding up really, really well. Installing this was a bit of a pain because of the lights. We did get one of the holes slightly off, so it's not quite as snug as I would like. And we have lost one of the sticky stickers there that has a Velcro pad. It's not a big deal. I need to buy a new one and slap in. But other than that, this has held up really well. As you can see, we've transported everything from grass to straw to soil to wood in the back of this. When we are on the road with Transport Evolved, this gets full, literally, to here with camera gear, to the point that actually I may have to buy a hard top because sometimes we can't fit all of our camera gear in the back of this. But this area is really very, very durable with the bed rug and the hard top. Everything stays secure. This water here is because I went to the garden centre yesterday and I didn't retract the top properly, or didn't push it back when I'd finished unloading it, and so we got a little bit of water in there. But it's no biggie because this is all really, really durable. It's waterproof. If it gets wet, it just dries off in a matter of moments when you drive. And of course, on a nice sunny day, the power lift still works. There it goes. And this is pretty durable and hard wearing too. The only other thing I'd point out is that the hitch down here has got a little bit of surface rust in it. That's primarily because we've had a really wet, cold winter. We had a lot of snow. This truck doesn't get washed, as you can see, all that much. It has to work for a living, and therefore there is a little bit of surface rust, but we can clean it and just wipe it with an oily rag and it disappears. We do that fairly regularly. Everything else back here works as it should. There's been no problems with the steps. They still work, as does the little step. And so throughout our 21-ish thousand miles, the business end of this truck has been super. The other thing I should probably note is that the power sockets in the bed of the truck have been super reliable. They are durable and weatherproof, and we've not had any issues with corrosion on the connectors. We've had to use them quite a lot over the winter when we've had power cuts because the Ford home integration system, the super expensive Ford home integration system that we spent a lot of time and money putting on the side of the house, is unreliable as all heck. I will tell you about that in a moment. But you should know that the 120 and 240 volt power takeoffs, or 110 and 230, depending on how you want to refer to them, they've been super reliable. And over the winter, we've been able to run appropriate heavy duty extension cables back into the house to keep things like the server room running and the fridge running and home appliances running. We've used like a toaster oven and a few other appliances straight off the back of the truck, and it's been no problem at all. Ford's Pro Power system is 100%, and I've actually been talking to electricians, and if the home integration system doesn't get its act together soon, for reasons that I will explain in a minute, we're just going to get them to put a generator hookup on the back of the house, and we'll just plug the truck directly in there and have an essential loads panel. Let's talk tyres. These tyres were the stock tyres that came with the truck. They're general grabbers. I don't rate them as being particularly good or particularly bad. They're just meh, summer tyres. We had them on the truck from new until about November when we swapped them out for some Nokian Hakkapeliitta R5 SUV winter tyres, and frankly those, if you haven't watched our winter tyre review, go watch it because they were the dog's doodads. Very reliable in winter conditions, very reliable in heavy snow. We never had any issues. These were put on last weekend and they will see us through the summer until the temperature starts to drop, and then we'll put the winter tyres back on. I really am an advocate for having these rather than the all-terrain tyres that are also an option on this truck. They're quieter, they give you better road noise, and they give you better handling on road surfaces. If you do a lot of off-roading, you may want to consider the off-road tyres, but honestly, the Nokian winter tyres were absolutely incredible off-road. I did most of my off-road driving, and I mean by that dirt trails and grass in the winter with the Nokians, and they had no trouble. In the summertime, I have noticed that these tyres do tend to slip a little bit on wet grass, so It's quite a heavy truck, and if you're doing something like trying to pull a tiny house, which is what I was doing, you did have a little bit of slippage, but everything has worked out with the tyres. At the front, there's really nothing bad to report. This frunk area is generally our go-to if we have to pick up groceries or anything else and we happen to be out in the truck. We can whack things in there. Very often we'll have stuff in the bed, so groceries go up front, and it's been really super reliable. As you can see, this is pretty hard wearing. It's got some scuff marks on it, but nothing too bad, and it's fairly easy to clean this out if you need to in anger. It's really useful to have the little cargo net there, and we use that if we're carrying something that needs to stay upright. And of course, these little hooks around the side of the frunk are great for hanging bags on. These power sockets, we've used them in anger to back up our house when our home integration system hasn't worked. And just like the ones on the rear of the truck, they've been super reliable, and we've had nary a problem. The only criticism I would have with this is that in order to use this, you have to kind of manually close the frunk lid, because you can't properly close it because it will reach the cables and then it will go back up. But if you leave it up, of course, if it's raining or snowing, then you're going to end up with a frunk full of rain or snow. So I wish that Ford had designed a little cable pass through somewhere in here to allow you to trail cables out of the front of the truck while the frunk was closed. That would be a really smart move. The only modification we've made to the front of this is this little 3D printed emergency cover. This truck, as with any electric car that has a frunk, has to have an emergency release button. The problem is it's about the same height as any large heavy thing you might be placing in the frunk. And so there have been instances, not with us, but with other F-150 Lightning drivers, where something heavy has hit this and then opened the frunk up. And it coincides with, obviously, you come to a stop at a traffic light, the object hits the button, and because you've already stopped, then the frunk opens. I've heard of that happening once or twice, so I 3D printed this, and it's prevented us from having any issues. I know other people 3D print them as well. I've got one for Tom Malogany, but I haven't managed to send it to him yet because my 3D printer has been unwell, and every time I print it out, something goes wrong with my 3D printer. At the front, we have these vents down here at the bottom. They are the vents for the battery cooling, the motor cooling, and the radiator that sits underneath here. It's apparently fairly common for error messages to pop up saying that there's an issue with the active air dam, which is what these are called, active air dams. And on this particular F-150 Lightning, we've had that error pop up probably about a dozen times. It doesn't prevent the truck from being driven. And when we had our 20,000 mile service, our Ford dealer went, yeah, every Ford EV that we see has this error pop up at some point. And it's just that it's right at the front, and all it takes is a bee or an insect or some debris from the road to get stuck in those shutters, and it can make the shutters difficult to close. And generally that piece of debris or dead animal removes itself at speed, and then the shutters can operate normally. But it's a fairly common error that pops up that you shouldn't be too worried about. The other thing that's worth noting is that we recently had the recall done for the wiper motors. There was a recall for the wiper motors on the F-150 Lightning. We had that done when we had the service. And I should also point out that we've had 2 front windscreens. We do drive a lot. We've done like 21,000 miles in less than a year, and we do quite a lot of highway and freeway driving. And at the start of the year, we got a stone chip. It was just a regular stone chip, and then it cracked when we had super cold weather, and it cracked all the way across the windscreen, so we had to have a replacement windscreen. And then about a week or so after that, when we were driving in California, we were driving through the mountains, and a truck threw up a rock and chipped our windscreen, which caused us to have a nasty chip. That was repaired by Safelite, who work with our insurance company. But as part of them repairing the chip and making sure it didn't spread, it spread. And so we have had the windscreen replaced a second time. Last weekend I went down and they replaced the windscreen with a new one. and there was a bit of an issue with the truck not wanting to talk to the recalibration system. They couldn't recalibrate it on the day, but I went back yesterday, as of the time of filming this, so we're filming this on Thursday. I went back yesterday to Safelite and they were able to reprogram the camera, so the camera is recalibrated and everything works as it should. When I got my F150 Lightning Lariat, it came free with this. This is a Ford Charge Station Pro. It allows me to charge the truck at up to 20 kilowatts or 80 amps from a 100 amp breaker on the side of my house. It's also integral to my home integration system. That's the backup power system that theoretically should allow my Ford truck to power my home or essential loads within my home in the case of a power cut or some other form of loss of power to the house. If you've watched videos on this channel about this system before, you'll know it's actually quite a long and complicated process, and we had a particular set of problems with this, and I think I finally got to the bottom of it. This here is the home integration system's inverter. This is where it takes power from the truck and turns it into AC power that can then be used in your home. And we've had several successful backup power events. And when I say successful, I mean we've faked a power cut by turning off the breaker box and convinced the truck that there was a power cut, and then the truck has provided power to the home. But the issue is this box, not the truck. See, when the power goes out, this box sends a signal for some reason over the internet back to a server somewhere that checks if it's okay to then ask the truck to start providing power. And without that okay, it just sits here and does nothing. If you live in a metropolitan area or a suburban area and you have a good internet provider, it's probably cable, it probably has a backup battery, so even if your mains power goes off, it will still be able to reach the internet and ask, hey, is it okay to provide backup power? Out here in the boonies, we not only have really dodgy internet, we actually have two internet connections. One is a local Wi-Fi down the valley that's provided by a local ISP. It's generally really reliable until the power goes out, at which point all of the transmitter stations down the valley back to the nearby town of Hillsborough stop working because they don't have any power. And we also have Starlink, which, because of all the trees in this area, and we have a tendency to have a lot of rain as we're having today, means that Starlink cannot always have a very good signal back up to space and then back down to a nearby base station in Seattle, Washington. What that means is that very often this can't easily connect to the internet. Now, the designers of the system had a really good idea, which was to put a little antenna on here for a cell phone connection. So it pings a local cell tower and it connects to the internet that way. Except where I live, our cell phone signal is terrible. On a day like today, when there's low cloud and there's heavy rain, this doesn't have a signal. It can't pick up a phone signal. And therefore, it can't use its backup system to reach out and say, hey, is it okay for me to ask the truck to power? And if it can't reach the server, it doesn't turn on. How do we know this? Well, we've run some tests. Every time the power has gone out and we've lost all internet connectivity, this has refused to power our house. On the occasions where it has been able to reach its server, everything works fine. It provides power and everything is good. When I started to film this segment, we actually tried to get the truck to power the house so I could show you the system operating. But for some reason, our local ISP doesn't seem to work with this unit. So if our Starlink is down and the signal is going over our local ISP, it just gets lost. And this system doesn't call home properly and never activates. And like I said, really bad weather, poor cell phone connectivity. So we have a kind of expensive paperweight that's sort of working. When we actually have power, we can actually power our home from the truck. But when the local internet goes down, or Starlink's having a bad day, or it can't reach because the cell phone connectivity is terrible, we're SOL. Which, if you think about it, in a power cut, you don't need that. You need this to communicate directly to the truck and authenticate and start transferring power. We bought this because we live in an area that's prone to earthquakes. We're expecting a massive earthquake to hit this region at some point in the next 20 to 30 years, maybe even sooner. And in the event of a major earthquake, your cell phone signals will be cut off. The local internet will most definitely be cut off. And Starlink may or may not continue to work depending on whether the base station in Seattle gets hit or not. So, poor design on the part of the people who designed the Ford home integration system. It's not Ford, but it's a partner company, and it's been installed by Sunrun. And Sunrun basically keep passing the blame and saying it's not their problem, it's our fault. We didn't get the system installed properly, there was some other issue. But Sunrun, to its defense, has offered to send out some engineers, and we're going to get that done. And hopefully I'll be able to convince them that the cell phone signal here is just too bad for this to be reliable. There you have it. Our Ford F-150 Lightning, after 21-ish thousand miles and, 8-9 months of ownership. I'm really glad we got it. I wish that Ford made a smaller electric pickup, because while I do need something this large to carry the large amount of gear and people, honestly, I think most people don't. This is a behemoth of a vehicle. Pickup trucks are not safe on our roads, really, honestly. They are responsible for way too many deaths. And we should be pushing towards smaller, more affordable, more sensibly sized cars. And that's one of the reasons why we still own our Chevrolet Bolt EV. It's one of the reasons why I'm hoping that we can still get an Aptera. And frankly, I would be happy with that if this is sat at home most of the time and only used for the times that we really need it, which is fairly regularly, to be honest. That's ideally how I would like to use this truck. On that note, we are done with today's video. If you have comments, drop us a polite note in the Discord chat room on Mastodon, or if you are a Patreon supporter, in the comments there. And if you want more, subscribe, hit the bell, and follow the links to regularly support us with a YouTube membership or a Patreon subscription. You'll also find links to our Ko-fi, Bitcoin, and Swag store, as well as that aforementioned Mastodon server. Scrolling on my right is the list of amazing charged up supporters, and shout outs go out to our V2G Patreon supporters. They are Pedro Mura Pinheiro, Alan Tupper, Andrew Martin, Bennett Elder, Brophy Wolf, Chris Maxwell, Cyprian Laplace, Dan Blair, Gordon C, Hay Esker, John Trammell, Kyle Fox, Mark Eggleton, Peter Dillinger, Regine Fellows, Sean Tucker, Stefan Fremgen, Stephen Williams, Hazlitt in the Gong, Paul Bricknell, Tony Moss, Carl Hodgson, Chris Centaur, Denny Hyde, Lance Schall, Linda Irish, Mike Weeder, and Paul Nelson. And finally, big thanks to our off-grid supporters. They are Paul Conway, Kevin Burrowbridge, Stephen O'Donoghue, Jim Burness, Robert Flannery, Aaron Hahn, Ellery Hensley, Rory Litwin, JP Fagerback, Dave Kitchen, Andrew Glenn, Anonymous Freak, Chris and Michael Johnson, Clay Witt, CPU Freak 101, Eric Knack, Joe Bresney, Joe Hughes, John Henderson, Laura Reynolds, Marcel Ward, Matthew Drobneck, Nigel S, Reggie Watts, Will Graylian, and of course, Ian. Don't forget that we produce content every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on this channel, plus of course our TEN News Roundup every Saturday. And then on a Sunday, we go over to Take Two, where we bring you our chicken and garden update, and of course also our Sunday music, which I'm just about to film in this rain. Yay! That's it. Thanks for joining me. And until next time, keep evolving.